Hi there, it's Nicole for Simon Says Stamp, and today I am so excited to be sharing a set of cards created with new stamps and dies from the Friends release. This was from a couple weeks back, and we are revisiting it and showing more ideas of what you can do with the awesome stamps and dies with this Friends release. I decided to do a set of 4 cards. I started with just 2, and I'm going to show you how I created these 2 pink and red cards. But at the end of the video, I'm going to share the kind of violet or blue-violet cards that are exactly the same. The greetings are switched up just in a different colorway. So this is a really easy card design that you could create in any of your favorite colors. I am using the Modern Flowers dies to die cut the flowers and the leaves and things from Simon Says Stamp cardstock. This is the Schoolhouse cardstock, the red that I'm die cutting right now. I am using the Spellbinders Platinum die cutting machine to die cut all of my pieces today, and the Tool-in-One from Spellbinders. If I need to pop anything out of those dies really easily, this is a fantastic tool for that. The dark pink color I'm using, this is the Doll Pink cardstock. I really originally kind of thought I was going to go maybe the Valentine's love theme way with my cards, but I think as they turned out, even though these cards, the pink and red cards, definitely could be used more for Valentine's or love themed type of card giving, I think they would work for any occasion, especially depending on what greetings you use. I wanted to use all 4 greetings from the Stained Glass stamp set, Stained Glass Love stamp set. And so I kind of ended up with 4 cards. Not to mention, when you are die cutting these pieces, you're not using all of the components. And I really, if at all possible, like to use all of the little pieces and components. So in order to do that and make the most of every little piece, which you'll see as I start to put the cards together, I really needed to make at least 2 in each colorway. So I could have gone on and done these in a whole rainbow of colors, really, because as long as you are kind of like me and don't want to waste any of these beautiful little die cuts, you can make a whole set of cards. The light pink color I'm using is Cotton Candy. The 2 green colors I'm using are Green Leaf and Green Apple, and I am making sure and using up every little part and piece of all of these pieces of cardstock. I keep a scrap file of my cardstock, and so when I need to do a project like this, especially when I'm die cutting things that aren't really that big. These are some nice sized dies, but they really fill up and use up all of those little pieces of scrap cardstock that I have in my file. I tried to keep my dies together as much as possible just because it really makes it easier when you go to put the cards together to just pop them out at the time. So I'm going to go ahead and ink up my backgrounds rather, and then we will start putting the whole card together. I'm using Bristol Smooth cardstock that's trimmed to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches for my backgrounds. I'm applying some Distress ink in Picked Raspberry and Mowed Lawn for the pink and red cards, and then spritzing the background with water from a distress sprayer and blotting that dry. It'll give it a little bit of a distressed look, which is what I wanted. I just didn't want it to be perfectly inked. I also, you might have noticed, did not ink clear to the edges. That was so just, I kind of wanted that very light effect around the edges, I guess I want to say. So I did not ink all the way to the edges. Here's a look at all of the dies that you get with the Modern Flowers. Starting by building the card from the background up, I am going to apply glue, just some little dots of glue to the back of my largest leaf die cut. And I'm going to use the die from the Stained Glass Love stamp and die collection as a guide to where that greeting is going to go. Next, I'm going to take the little bit darker color. I used the lighter color for the outline of this leaf, and I'm going to start filling it in. And this is an example of how it can be a little bit tricky to get them lined up if you've already popped them all out. This is actually the second card I made. I already made the other one, so these are all the extra pieces. I kind of got smarter when I put together the blue and violet cards and kept the dies in order on my craft mat here, so it was a lot easier to fill them in because I really had to maneuver these particular ones around quite a bit to make sure they fit. It can be a little tricky to know which one goes where. When you're doing an inlay like this, where there are some layers, it's not all just inlay, you need to work from the background up. I really felt that even though parts of my design were going to be covered, maybe a leaf here and there, I really wanted to fill in each inlay layer. It made for the design to look a lot nicer, I think, with the finished effect. So I'm going to start with the large green leaf here, and then we're going to adhere the larger flower, the smaller flower, and then the little set of leaves, and we'll add the other little duo of leaves after we've attached the greeting. That's kind of my process for each step of this card design. I like the Ranger Multi-Matte Medium. I did use some glossy accents too. I noticed that my little bottle of matte medium is starting to get empty, and sometimes it can be a little tricky to get the glue to come out if I haven't stored it upside down, which I kept setting it up so the glue kept running to the end of the bottle. And I flip-flopped between the Ranger Multi-Matte Medium and Glossy Accents, and I really didn't feel like there was a huge difference with them. I like the matte medium mostly because it dries matte and it doesn't dry glossy. So if some glue comes out from underneath anything, you're not going to see that glossy look. It just dries matte. However, I really didn't feel like I had any trouble with this card, so I would recommend either one. And I'm using my flowers as a guide, you can see, and I'm also using my greeting die as a guide for where I want all these little flowers to go. Once the outline is in place, I'm going to grab all of the contrasting little pieces and just start, it's like a puzzle, just start putting it all back together. This is the Doll Pink and Schoolhouse Red. If some of the pieces, if you don't want to do it with your fingers and you want to really keep your fingers out of the glue, a jewel picker or quick stick tool is phenomenal for this. Makes it a lot easier to just pick those little pieces up and put them where they go. I did it both ways. None of these pieces are super, super tiny except for maybe a couple of the little inside leaf pieces. It really just kind of depends. I thought it was a little bit easier to pick the kind of rounded half moon shapes for the outside of the flower with my fingers rather than the jewel picker. And then I would press it down in place with the jewel picker to keep my fingers out of any adhesive. Now the little inside dots for the inside of this flower and the smaller design, I am actually not going to inlay either one of these, and I will show you what I'm going to do for those here in a little bit. I decided I didn't want to add any cardstock inside there, and we'll use some Nouveau crystal drops instead. Using that as my sentiment die as a guide again, I'm going to attach my leaf. And then we'll go ahead and do the same thing that we just did for the large leaf and the larger flower and fill in all those little areas with the contrasting color. Or tone on tone, either way. I think it gives a lot more depth and dimension to these awesome modern flowers. I absolutely love them. Another idea that I think would be really fun is to create an entire background with these modern flowers, whether you do an inlay, which would be quite a bit of work. Or maybe you just use the outlines of these shapes and cover the back of a background with this and layer some greetings over it. I think that that would be amazing. You could do tone on tone, you could color them in, you could ink them, you could ink up a background and put all white die cuts on top of it, die cut them from glitter cardstock. I just think there's all kinds of different ways to use these modern flowers and really make some amazing card designs. Little dabs of glue is another thing that really helps with this. You do not want glue coming out from around the dies. It makes a mess of the card, so I use very little dabs of glue. Again, just kind of pushing them in place with a jewel picker. And that is all finished up. So let's work on the greeting next before we add the final die cut piece. I am going to ink up the greeting. I am showing the VersaFine black ink here. However, please keep in mind, I actually switched this and used Lawn Fawn jet black ink. Kind of at the last moment, I decided I wanted to color in the greeting with Copic markers, and with VersaFine Onyx black ink, it's a pigment ink and it is going to bleed and smear with the alcohol ink markers. So definitely use an ink that is Copic friendly instead. I'm going to die cut my greeting, and I left it as is for now. I couldn't decide if I wanted to color in the letters or not. I tend to always want to color them in, and originally I thought, well, maybe I'll try something different. Maybe I'll leave it as is. I will leave it just this nice black outline, maybe color in the center or color in those little hearts with a red marker. We'll, just see. And so I left it, and I adhered my leaves. I put some foam adhesive on the back of the die cut greeting and popped it into place. And almost immediately I was like, nope, this is not me. This isn't going to work. I can't leave it like that. So I'm going to go ahead. I did stamp another greeting because I did try to color it with Copic markers first. I always try to make it work first. And the black ink smeared and bled, so that wasn't going to work. I went ahead and stamped another one using Lawn Fawn jet black ink, die cut it, and I colored in the hearts with a red marker and the rest of the letters with a couple of shades of pink markers. Just kind of doing an ombre effect here. So pretty. Adds just a tiny touch of color. It's not overwhelming at all. The purple version has some really pretty kind of violet-y or blue violet shades. Again, ombre effect, very light, but I think it adds so much to this, and it's really going to be effective when I add Nouveau Crystal Glaze on top, which kind of adds to that whole stained glass feel that this stamp set is named for. I'm adding some foam adhesive squares to the back of my greeting, and then I'm going to pop this in place. I like the little bit of dimension. I think it lays a lot nicer, especially we've got some layers going on. It's not a lot, but there are some layers from all of these just inlay shapes. And if I laid it flat, I just didn't think it looked very nice. So I went ahead and added foam adhesive squares to the back of this. Gives it a little bit of dimension, really draws your eye into the greeting first, and then the flowers are just a nice little accent for the design. Now to finish the greeting, I want to stamp the little phrase on some black cardstock using a clear embossing powder and heat setting with white embossing powder. I have a little scrap of black cardstock here that I am stamping all of my greetings on. Heat embossing. We'll trim that into a thin strip and trim it up. Put some foam adhesive squares on the back of this as well. And then pop that either above or below the greeting, depending on however best it is to position it for the sentiment to make sense. So some of them For example, this one with the happy greeting, the greeting is going to read, "You make me incredibly happy." For the adore greeting, the other pink and red card, it's adore you forever and always. Same thing with the purple and blue cards. One is above, one is below. I did trim my larger foam adhesive squares into thirds to make them work on this thin strip. And then I'm going to just pop that into place, centering it right above or below the greeting. Attach this whole panel to a white top fold card base. It is trimmed slightly smaller than A2 sized, meaning it's going to have this nice little white border all the way around. You could even attach this with foam adhesive if you wanted a little dimension for your panel. I adhered mine directly to the card base, keeping it as flat as possible. And then comes the fun finishing touches. For the finishing touches, we're going to take some Nouveau crystal drops in Simply White, which is my very favorite. It is a beautiful opaque white. And first fill in the center of the flowers. And then add some additional drops throughout the design. I think it just kind of balances out the whole thing. Just a few here and there, a few below the greeting, and then a few up above where the majority of the floral design is centered. These will need to dry completely for 24 hours so that they are nice and hard and that they won't flatten when you try to mail them or anything like that. Then I'm going to take Nouveau Crystal Glaze. This is clear, much like Glossy Accents. I've really been liking it lately. And I am going to go over the Stained Glass Love sentiment. I have put a fine tip applicator on my bottle, which really helps with these small little areas, keeping it inside the line. Again, this is going to need to sit and completely dry, but when it is dry, you're left with a beautiful glossy finish. At the end of the video, I will show all 4 completed cards after they have been allowed to sit and dry overnight. Next, I'm not going to share that making the cards because it is exactly all the same steps again, but I do want to share the cards in the other colorway, which is the blue and violet. I used shaded lilac and blueprint sketch distress inks for the background, and then I used lavender and blue violet and I can't remember the other purple name. It is listed below in the supplies. Cardstock for my flowers. The same green apple and green leaf for the leaves. Same design, just a different set of markers to color in the insides of the letters. So here is a look at the finished cards. Here are the pink and red versions with those awesome glossy finished stained glass greetings. And here are the blue-purple version. Thanks for joining me today for this set of 4 cards featuring stamps and dies from the Simon Says Stamp Friends release. The supplies I used to create my cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more videos featuring Simon Says Stamps and dies that you might be interested in. Please subscribe for weekly card making and stamping videos. Thanks for watching. I'm so glad that you're here, and we'll catch you next time.